Today our objective is that we are going to talk about how to write the evidence and commentary in an analysis essay. The importance of evidence and commentary is that it must support the topic sentence claim that's being defended by the author. There must be an appropriate amount as well, not too much to overwhelm the audience with evidence, and not too little to not convince the audience enough. Also, it's important that the evidence and commentary, while supporting the topic sentences, also connect back to supporting the thesis to make the essay have overall cohesion. Therefore, we will first start by reading the example thesis and topic sentences from the analysis essay from a children's story. Then we will illustrate the concept of evidence with commentary and explain the choices we made in regard to this step.
Our thesis is based off our common children's story, The Lion King. In the film The Lion King, a lion named Simba must accept who he is in order to free his land from the tyranny of his uncle Scar. By contrasting Scar's world of darkness with Simba's world of light, as well as keeping Simba's mistakes from defining who he is, the film encourages their young audience to face their obstacles and hardships in life with courage and bravery, ultimately moving the audience to accept who they are and stay true to their character.
The contrasting of light and darkness throughout the film illustrates the harshness and hardships of the real world in order to encourage the young audience to limit the impact of those obstacles in their lives.
In the film, Simba must learn to overcome his past, which is filled with the loss and the pain of his father's death, in order for Simba to grow as a character and into a king.
Brother, help me! Long live the king.
The film includes his father's death in order to elicit the audience's pity and care for a child who no longer has a father. The film uses this event to contrast the darkness and evil-mindedness of Scar, who is willing to kill his own brother with the intent of becoming king, with the innocence of a young Simba practicing his roar at the same time.
I will be king. Stick with me, and you'll never go hungry again. So prepare for the cool of the century. Be prepared for the murkiest scam. Meticulous planning, tenacity spanning, decades of denial is simply why I'll be king undisputed, respected, saluted, and seen for the wonder I am. Yes, my teeth and ambitions are bad. Be prepared.
Well, when I'm king, that'll be the first thing to go.
Not so long as I'm around.
Well, in that case, you're fired.
Nice try, but only the king can do that.
Well, he's the future king. Yeah. So you have to do what I tell you.
Not yet, I don't. And with an attitude like that, I'm afraid you're shaping up to be a pretty pathetic king indeed.
Not the way I see it. I'm gonna be a mighty king, so enemies beware.
Well, I've never seen a king or beast with quite so little hair.
I'm gonna be the main event, like no king was before. I'm brushing up, I'm looking down, I'm working on my war.
Thus far, rather uninspiring thing.
Oh, I just can't wait to be king.
With Simba's ability to find happiness and true friendship in the hardest of times with Pumbaa and Timon, in an oasis far from home, Simba adapts to his new life and learns to forget previous losses and move on in order to do what is right. We started writing our commentary with the intent of explaining our evidence. We began the commentary by connecting it back to the topic sentence, which by extension connects to the thesis. So with a good piece of evidence, you create a strong foundation to stand on. Since we are talking about the difference between light and darkness in this paragraph, we put in evidence of a dark element of the film, Mufasa's death. Then we contrasted it with the innocence of Simba, who is simply a curious lion with big ambitions for the future. With this contrast, you create a great connection with what you are talking about to your thesis. Then we took that evidence a step further, in which we explained how, even through darkness, Simba was able to shine like the sun and banish the darkness. thus connecting all the way back to our main point in the thesis, overcoming hardships with courage and bravery. So if you were to make steps, this is how you would go about writing this. You would begin with your topic sentence. Step 2, figure out what evidence you want to use to support your topic sentence and thesis. Step 3, state the evidence by embedding a quote, or in this case, talking about a scene in a film. Step 4, explain how your evidence supports your argument. 5. Rejoice! You have finished the first chunk. We shall not be going to the second chunk in this lesson, but it's essentially the same process listed here.
We'll be writing about a speech written and delivered by Alfred M. Greene, an African-American man. It was written in April 1861 in Philadelphia to his audience of fellow male fighting-age African-Americans. The context for this situation was that African-Americans were still prohibited from fighting in the Union Army, and the exigence of this situation was that the Civil War had begun a month before. Greene's purpose in writing the speech was to express that African-Americans should be able to enlist, and moreover, they should strive to be admitted into the Army and be prepared to serve the first second they are allowed to. To summarize the speech, first, while using patriotic diction, Greene acknowledges how the African Americans in the United States have not been treated fairly because of their race. He then begins to argue in spite of these differences by saying that racial prejudice would merely be a bump in the road for American history. Greene drives home his opinion that African Americans should serve in the military by giving his audience the incentive of freeing their Southern brethren and eventually gaining freedom and respect from the powerful American governmental figures. The prompt we are responding to is write an essay in which you analyze the methods that Greene uses to persuade his fellow African Americans to join the Union forces.
In a speech at Philadelphia in April 1861, serving in the U.S. Army as African Americans was endorsed by Alfred M. Greene by referencing honorable figures in American history and appealing to the audience's patriotism. Greene hopes to convince his fellow African Americans to forget past wrongs and be prepared to serve in the Army, ultimately moving them to free their Southern brethren and to gain credit among the powerful elites to inspire change for the future.
Greene, referencing honorable figures in American history, builds a sense of nationalism among his audience in order to persuade them to be ready to serve in the military.
Knowing that the audience revered the immortal Washington and Jackson, Greene name-dropped these respected leaders to gain an emotional response from his audience. With the Civil War having started a month earlier, the Union was angry, undermanned, and unprepared for war, so Greene understood that they would need more men to fight eventually. Fearing that his African-American brethren would refuse to serve once the opportunity was presented to them, Greene wrote the speech with the intention of reminding them that they needed to look at the bigger picture in order to have freedom eventually. Using the emotional power of patriotism by referencing George Washington and Andrew Jackson, Greene recalled times when every race felt equal, hoping that his audience would view these times of prejudice as a misstep in American society that would eventually be corrected by serving in and winning the war to gain freedom for their Southern brethren. The commentary was made for the purpose of explaining Greene's rhetorical strategies. By analyzing the author's statements from his speech, we were able to deduce moves that the author made in the form of ing verbs. These ing verbs became parts of our speech thesis that we were able to incorporate into our topic sentences. We used our commentary to explain why and how Greene decided to make the choices he did in his speech. Since we are talking about Greene referencing honorable figures in American history, we focus on how using these figures would remind his audience of their American roots, and hopefully encourage them to forget about the prejudice made against them and join the Union Army when the inevitable time came to let African Americans serve in the military. We then connected Greene's references to historical figures to an emotional appeal centered around pride and patriotism. We say all three of the appeals in his speech, but to us, the emotional appeal was the most prominent and effective, so we connected our idea about it back to the topic sentence and thesis of the writing. It is important to write the commentary about the text evidence that is used to prove the claim made in the topic sentence. As stated before, this interconnection between different parts of the essay gives it an overall cohesion and sophistication that will guarantee a better piece of writing.
As a review, make sure to always follow the 3 criteria of evidence in commentary. First, make sure that the evidence supports the topic sentence in order to convince the audience of the claim it makes. Second, make sure that the evidence supports the thesis in order to give the essay overall cohesion. Third, make sure that the evidence is properly formatted with the appropriate length and embedding technique. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.
And start. So, start, take 2. 3. 4.
Our topic. Oh crap, that's not right. Okay. Yikes. Okay. Green. Oh. Okay.
In a speech. Wait, let me do this. In a speech of Phil. Okay, let me try again.
To accept who they are and stay true to their character. I'm done.